Hey, what's going on, guys? Threat Level Midnight here, and I got another maintenance video for you today. We're just going to be field stripping a Gen 5 Glock 34, and this one's decked out with all my cross armory upgrades on there. So we're just going to get into it. It's going to be a basic field strip cleaning, how I like to clean these things. For a lot of you, it'll be mundane, but for some of you, it might be helpful. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright guys, so first things first, we're just going to unload this thing, make sure it's clear before we get going. I think a lot of accidental discharges happen during regular maintenance, so first things first, remove your magazine, go ahead and check that chamber, and it is clear. So when I take these guns apart, I like to try to do it as simple as possible. So all you're going to do is, of course, once your chamber is clear, you go ahead and pull the trigger. I like to get my fingers just like this, so I'll have my thumb right on that the beaver tail or the tang, and then my index finger will be right on the rear sight. And all I do is just squeeze my hand, and it pulls the slide back just enough to release that slide lock. And if you notice there, I got that cross armory. They call it extended, but really it's just kind of a different design. It's like a beveled slide release. It's at an angle, and it really does make it easier to take this thing apart. So I hold my slide locked down, and then slide comes right off. You'll see that on this gun you have your front slide rails and then your back slide rails. So on some guns where you need to take the slide and slide it all the way forward, this one you just need to move it past a little bit and then it'll come undone. So from there we can set the frame aside, because that's as far as I'm going to take that down for just a field strip. Remove our guide rod and recoil spring assembly. It's all captive, so there's nothing that's going to shoot out on you here. And again, this is a Gen 5, so it's got the triple springs in there. And then next thing, we'll just drop the barrel out. And that's as far as we're going to take the slide down as well. So you can see that's super easy, no tools required. I'm not teaching any groundbreaking stuff here with the Glocks. They've been around for a long time. So the first thing I like to do is just kind of get some CLP on the barrel. My biggest focus on the barrel is going to be the feed ramp, and then you can get a little bit of buildup right here on the sides. Every now and then I need to scrape that, so I'm just going to get some CLP and hit it with a brush real quick and just leave it on there while we go ahead and address the rest of the gun. And this gun isn't particularly dirty. I probably shot 300 rounds through it, shot a couple of match stages.
Ready, stand by. Cool.
And then went to my brother's ranch and just carried it on my hip, and when we were walking, you know, in the woods and whatnot.
I'm sweating like a whore.
So not super dirty anyways. And I know there's plenty of people out there who will say, hey, you don't even need to clean it, it's a Glock. And it's like, you know, that little, you know, round count through there, yeah, it's probably not going to matter. It's probably still going to run just fine. But I'm always a firm believer that if you take care of your guns take care of you. So I'm not really scrubbing the feed ramp right now. All I'm doing is just getting that CLP on. And you can see the 34 has like a recess, like target crown, and that can get a little buildup in it too. So I'm just going to hit that and just let the CLP kind of sit on there a little bit. And now that I have CLP on my brush, I can go ahead and look at the slide. So areas that are going to get dirty in here are right here, but it's not going to get so dirty in here to the point where it's going to foul the gun up. Where I usually look is right here, like on my breech face. Right in the corners, you can start getting a lot of carbon buildup, and sometimes I'll need to scrape that out, but I pretty much scrape it out every time. So just looking at it right now, I really don't see anything built up. But a lot of my focus on the slide itself is going to be right here on the breech face. You can kind of see you can see the imprint of the casing right there. It's like there's some brass transfer and a lot of carbon that just sits right there. So I'm really going to focus on this. And all I'm doing was just hitting it with the brush. And you saw that I applied a few drops of the CLP. You can use whatever you want. Sometimes I've used WD-40. I've used Impro 7, you know, you name it. All the Hoppies, you know, stuff. I'm not picky when it comes to cleaners and like gun oils and stuff. Pretty much like everyone's been issued CLP since the dawn of time if you're police or military, so no big deal there. So just going to hit this with a brush. And then I'm going to hit this portion too. And we could do a more detailed slide breakdown. But today it's just really not necessary. And I just want to do a quick video on just generic field stripping and rudimentary maintenance for your Glock. And then as far as in the frame goes, so now that we have CLP sitting on these two, we'll just look at the frame, and you can see like you can get a little bit of carbon just on your internal parts right here, and then maybe you see a little bit on your trigger parts. So I like to keep those clean. This is the Cross Armory drop-in, and it's you know, gold and it's coated, so stuff doesn't really stick to it. So I'm not really getting buildup on here, and more or less I can just get a rag and I can wipe this stuff down. It's not a big deal. And just like that, the little smudge of carbon that was on there is gone. You can see in the light there. And then same right here. This is the part of the trigger bar that interfaces with your firing pin block that sits inside your slide. So because those are parts that get worn on, I just want to make sure they're clean, and the smoother they are and the more polished they are, the smoother your trigger is going to be. So I can really appreciate this drop-in trigger from Cross. Really everything's polished to a high sheen, and it really does reduce the trigger pull weight. They advertise it at 3.5 pounds, and I haven't put a trigger pull gauge on it, but just going by feel, it feels about 3.5, and they did a good job with this one. So on the frame, not a lot to it, especially when the gun's not that dirty. Every now and then you want to look at like your slide rails right here, and you can just run a brush through here, especially if you've been like trucking around and got like sand or dirt or debris in your gun, or you're in like desert terrain. So like my duty gun out here, I live in the desert, and in the summertime we get those sandstorms. You know, I'll pull my gun apart once a week, even if I'm not firing it. Usually I should be firing it every week, but and just check like my slide rails, my internals, because dust will always find its way in. And the wetter you leave your gun, if you leave a ton of CLP in there, it's just going to attract more and more dust and carbon. So it's best just scrub it and then just wipe everything out real good. And that's all I'm doing to the frame here. You can see I touched it a little bit with the brush, but I really don't need to. And all I'm doing is just wiping stuff down. And every now and then too, if you look inside like your mag well, they can get dirty in there. You can get dust and stuff in there too, and but that's not really a big deal. But if you ever feel like your mags are binding, it's worthwhile. You can see what I did is just grab this rag, pull it through, and then I pull it back out, and that's it. So my frame is done, and it looks good. Everything that's shiny and polished is looking shiny and polished. My slide rail sections are clean and clear of debris, so I'm satisfied with that. So now that the CLP's been sitting on the barrel for a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and give this feed ramp a little bit more attention and just give it more of a scrub. And notice I'm doing this before I go ahead and run a snake through the barrel. I like to use bore snakes. It's faster and a lot easier than pushing patches and brushes and less parts. So I'm going to do this first because every time I have a brush stroke through here, I'm kicking debris down the barrel of the gun, and it's going to be sitting in there. And I don't know if you can kind of see what that looks like, but I can definitely see, you know, flecks of CLP and carbon just kind of sitting in the barrel. So when we're done scrubbing this thing, then we'll go ahead and use that bore snake and mop it out. So I'm satisfied with the exterior of the barrel, and we'll go ahead and get a 9mm bore snake. And I like to generally run this thing through maybe 3 times, but I guess it's situation dependent. So I'll wipe off the excess CLP that's on the outside real quick. And when you wipe it down, you'll be able to see if the feed ramp's actually clean. So you can see that reflection off of there. I don't see any leftover carbon on there. I don't see any buildup, so I'm satisfied with that. You know, and you can see that wasn't a lot of scrubbing. But what I can see is right here. Let me kick some other lighting on and see if you can tell. You can see it right here. That's a piece of hard carbon that's built up. And not that this is going to cause a problem, but over time it might. So just take the metal end of this and just kind of scrape that. And you can see that it flaked right off just by hitting it with a piece of metal. I'll go ahead and just brush the rest of it off. But you can see, if you don't look closely, you can get hard carbon that's kind of just built up on certain parts, which is why the feed ramp and these sections of the barrel are what I'm most concerned about. So I start with my chamber to muzzle direction and just pull the snake through. Like I said, I only shot like 300 rounds out of this thing, so I'm only going to give it like 3 pulls through here. And for those of you that don't know what a bore snake is, basically you can put CLP on the front of it right here, this leading edge, and it's followed by 2 sets of copper brush, and then a thicker piece of, I don't know whether it's nylon or cotton or whatever material this is, and it pretty much just mops your barrel out after the brushes run through. And it's good for expedient cleaning. So just looking through the barrel, that looks pretty darn good to me. I'm happy with that, and I'll go ahead and set that aside with the frame. I like to wrap up my bore snakes when I'm done so they're organized. Yeah, keep your workbench clean. That's a bit of advice from me. I say that as my other workbenches are a complete mess right now, but you know, I hate having to be searching around for stuff all the time, so I like having everything wrapped up and organized as soon as I'm done. So just like when we started, I'm just kind of focusing on that breech face area. And you can see there's a little bit of a carbon ring on there, so I'm not going to beat this thing up with the stainless steel brush, but I am going to hit it with the stainless steel brush on the breech face here. And usually that's what it takes for me to effectively get all that carbon and brass off of there, if I'm not using like a hard solvent. And I don't really care for using like more potent solvents, so I'd rather just use the stainless steel bristle brush instead and just give it a little bit of love with the brush instead of putting that stuff on there. So now all I'm going to do is just wipe this down. You can see that around my front sight post here, kind of dingy. Just externally, I'm just looking. I'll just hit that with the nylon brush. It's not a big deal. You know, anything where you might get carbon built up, just hit it with the brush with a little CLP on it and just wipe it down. And sometimes you can even just wipe it down without any CLP. Now, these channels right here, you could use Q-tips. Let me see if I have any Q-tips in here. Like these tracks, you could use Q-tips in here, you know, and it mops all this stuff up. Usually what I do is just I get a rag, pinch it, and just jam it in there. Because I always run out of Q-tips anyway, so just jam it in there, wipe it up. Now you can see it took all that CLP off of there and cleaned it all up, and it looks good. Get into my slide rails a little bit, and then I'm just going to bring this shirt through our ejection port, and I'm pulling it through, and that's just scrubbing our breech face. So now you can see that you still see a little ring, and there's going to be a permanent ring on there. I mean, there's no two ways about it. There's the original finish, and then what gets rubbed off. So that's like the original finish that's on there, that ring, and the internal ring too, about where the primer sits. But that looks pretty darn good. So we have our slide done, our barrels done, our frames done, and now we get to this the guide rod and recoil spring assembly. And all we're going to do is just wipe this thing down. And in my previous maintenance videos, like this rag that I have right here is fairly saturated in CLP. I've been using it for a long time. And pretty much I don't need to add any more lubrication to this gun than what's left behind from this rag. And a lot of people will start dousing their guns like, oh, I got to oil my gun up. And it's like, no, you don't. You're not running a belt-fed gun on like cyclic. You don't need to keep this thing greased up with LSA or some sort of heavy grease. And I just noticed my rear sight has a little bit of rust on it right here. I was carrying this thing. It was raining up at my brother's house, so you know the steel part's pretty prone to rust. So I'll just hit that with a brush, get a little CLP on it, and that'll protect it in the future. But yeah, word of advice: if you do live in a wet climate or you're going to a wet area, you know, wipe your stuff down, clean it off afterwards, at least with like a CLP coated rag, and that'll keep things from rusting out on you. And I'll just wipe that off. So now slide's looking good, and now we're ready to start reassembling this thing. I'm satisfied with the job here. Again, this wasn't like a super detailed cleaning. I'm not passing no white glove inspection with this, but this will keep it running, you know, 100% hassle-free the next time I go out and shoot it. So drop my barrel in, reinsert my guide rod and recoil assembly. Now, for the 34s, because it's such a long slide, you could try hooking it up here and running it all the way back and keeping it on. Or you can just drop it on about halfway, like this, not even halfway, just past your slide rails, and now it's back together right there. And there you go, quick function check. Everything works properly, and we're all set. So thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful to some of you, and like, comment, subscribe.